start off the word of prayer. Our most great and eternal God and Father, as we are gathered together here as brethren for you on your holy Sabbath day, in celebration, Father, of the inalienable rights and freedoms that you have granted unto us, I pray that the words which I am to speak will be said in clarity, humility, and brevity, Lord. These things I ask, dear Father, in the faith of Jesus Christ, plan of salvation. Amen. So my study today, my shorts, will be dealing on the assault on liberty of conscience. So I will be dealing with the assault on liberty of conscience. And some of the items that I'll be touching on, Brother Hume touched on it earlier. Nevertheless, I may, for the sake of the study, need to retrace some of those steps. So, we as Christians are locked in a conflict around the world by two entities, the two great enemies of God and man, as detailed in Revelation chapter 17. And since I will be referring to some of the aspects in this chapter, I will just, for the sake of context, like to read a few verses from it. So, I read Revelation chapter 17, I read verse 1, verse 2, verse 3, verse 8, and so on, right? So, we'll go on, read from verse 1. And there came one of the seven angels, which had the seven vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will shew thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornications, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Verse 7, And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman, and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath 7 heads and 10 horns. And the beast which thou sawest was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wander, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is. For the sake of completeness, I'll read verse 14. And he shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. For he is Lord of lords, and King of kings. And they that are with him are called, and chosen, and faithful. So, we have these two entities laid out, the woman and the beast that carried her. Now, there are many, even though these, in the chapter Revelation 17, they are presented as somewhat antagonistic to each other, they do share much in common. I will not be able to go through all the scriptures, but I'll just touch on some of these points. But we'll be zeroing in on the scarlet-colored beast and his influence and his assault on liberty of conscience. So first, see both these entities are identified as global entities, seeing that both the woman and the beast sitteth upon many waters, which the angel interprets in verse 15, and he said unto me, The waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are multitudes and nations and tongues, and peoples and tongues. So, the philosophy or ideologies of both these entities span across nations, across languages, across cultural boundaries. They have influence in many countries. Scripture shows that the ideologies and practices attract unto them the ungodly. For it is said in verse 8, And the beast which thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wander, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. Now, in scripture, life is defined in a broader sense as an experience of righteousness by faith. Right? So, and righteousness is identified as God himself. So if they are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, it means that they are void of life. Thus they are void of righteousness. And since God is righteousness, they are void of God, thus the ungodly. Right? The scripture also goes on and shows that they share an abhorrent hatred for the testimony of Jesus and the word of God and all that is birthed by it. Verse 14. They shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. But we see that these entities, they make war with the Lamb. They have a hatred for the Lamb, for the testimony of Jesus, and for them that follow him. Now, some of the scriptures I will not be able to touch, but we see also in Revelation 17, the beast is identified under many names, many banners. See, but they all share one common philosophy. Even though they have many names, yet it is one beast. So, and that common philosophy is the obstinate rebellion against Yahweh, which is manifest in targeted assault against the social Christian. Right? So, in regard to the multitude of names and the banners under which this entity is identified, one of particular interest which we will be touching on today is what is commonly known now as the LGBTIQ or the sodomite movement, or scabs as we use it, right? Scabs, yes. Sodom, Gomorrah, Gila, Adna, Zeboim. Right? No, or basically those that have drunken the wine of Sodom and have eaten the bread of Gomorrah. Now, we're going to change gears just slightly. I'm going to come back to this point. But we're going to change gears just a little bit, and we're going to touch on the concept of liberty of conscience or religious liberty as it relates to the testimony of Jesus. So, I turn to Revelation chapter 13 and verse 11. We're going to be looking primarily at the first part. And it says here, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb. Now we'll pause there, because that's what we're generally going to be known here. Now, scripture, this is giving witness to the rise of the United States in prophecy. And the two horns like a lamb identify two institutions at the founding of the nation which were influenced by the testimony of Jesus, and which promote the social Christy, which is the influence of Christ in society. These two powers are republicanism and Protestantism. These two institutions, the one built upon the principles of freedom from sin and the other upon the inalienable rights and freedoms of all men, though they be two, they are inextricably united. A central bar-running theme between them both, namely liberty of conscience, the right to serve God according to the dictates of one's conscience, and the freedom to express that conscientious conviction. This is a hallmark of both republicanism and Protestantism. So liberty of conscience is protected by a republican form of government and the true faith of Protestantism, the faith of Jesus Christ. So that the founding fathers place a high regard on liberty of conscience and the inalienable rights of man. And we're just going to quote from them quickly here. My first quote is taken from the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. And it states, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press, or the right of the people to peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Now this was added in to protect against religious persecution. That men are free to serve God according to the dictates of their conscience. Thus government should not institute any religion nor prohibit the free exercise thereof. The next quote is taken from the Declaration of Independence, 1776. One excerpt: we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Right? I also want to take a quote from I believe this is the Virginia Bill of Rights, 1776, as quoted in the book Rights of the People by A.T. Jones. It says here that religion or the duty which we owe to our Creator and the manner of discharging it can be directed only by reason and conviction, not by force or violence, and therefore all men are equally entitled to the free exercise of religion according to the dictates of the conscience. So we see a common theme in the running through the statements of great reformers also. I would just like to quote quickly from, I'll quote it. I know I'm low on time, but I'll quote it nonetheless. This is a famous statement from Martin Luther as he gave a testimony before the Diet of Worms in 1521, I believe it was. In answer, he would recant his writings, and he placed highest regard on freedom of conscience or liberty of conscience. And in his response he said, and this is quoted from the Great Controversy: "Since your most serene majesty and your high mightiness require from me a clear and simple, precise answer, I will give you one. And it is this: I cannot submit my faith either to the Pope or to the councils, because it is clear as day that they have frequently erred and contradicted each other. Unless I am convinced by the testimony of Scripture and by the clearest reasoning, unless I am persuaded by means of the passages I have quoted, and unless they thus render my conscience bound by the word of God, I cannot and will not retract. For it is unsafe, or it is not safe, for a Christian to speak against his conscience. Here I stand, I can do no other. May God help me. Amen." In a follow-up letter, which he wrote to the emperor after this diet, he writes this. He says, "God, who is a searcher of hearts, is my witness, that I am ready most earnestly to obey your majesty in honor or in dishonor, in life or in death, and with no exception save the word of God, by which man lives. And in the affairs of this present life, my fidelity shall be unshaken, for here to lose or to gain is of no consequence to salvation. But when eternal interests are concerned, God wills not that man should submit unto man. For such submission in spiritual matters is a real worship, and ought to be rendered solely to the Creator." Amen. So we see a common theme running through the birth of the United States, as Brother Humes mentioned, being the basis of Republican government, and the doctrine propagated by the Protestant Reformation. And since then we see that scarlet-colored beasts in a multitudinous names of blasphemy, which include the Sodomite movement, make war against the Lamb, then this entity would make war against the two Lamb-like institutions, and consequently the principle on which they are founded, namely liberty of conscience. To show this, that the Solomite movement has always been hostile to the principle of liberty of conscience, and any expression of conscientious objection to the systemic moral decadence of society. I'll quote quickly from Genesis 19. For the sake of time, I wouldn't read the entire account, but two angels, and Yahweh in a theophanic form, came to speak to Abraham. Two of these angels went on ahead to the city of Sodom. And while they were there, they were invited to stay at Lot's house. But the men of Sodom, seeing them and desiring to know them carnally, decided to basically, as Brother Pong said, in plainest sense, they wanted to rape the men. Right? But I want to see what is the response here. Lot, verse 6. I'll read from verse 6. And Lot went out at the door unto them, and shut the door after him, and said, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. Behold, now I have two daughters which have not known man. Let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you, and do ye to them as is good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing, for therefore came they under the shadow of my roof. Now obviously this was wrong for Lot to do, to offer his daughters unto these ungodly men. But, the time spent in the atmosphere of that decadence had a somewhat weakening moral effect on him. Nevertheless, his conscientious stand against the evil of Sodom was made, and this is the response. And they said, stand back. And they said again, this one fellow came in to sojourn, and he needs to be a judge. Now will we deal worse with thee than with them? And they pressed so upon the man, even Lot, and came near to break the door. But the men put forth their hand and pulled Lot into the house to them, and shut the door. And they smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves to find the door. So we see their response to a conscientious denunciation of evil. Lot, being convicted in his conscience, thought it necessary to speak out against it, and violence was threatened against it. For that. Now, I'm not short on time, but I just want
the Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA, in ensuring traditional marriage in federal law. But writing for the majority, Justice Anthony Kennedy said, the avowed purpose and practical effect of the law here in question are to impose a disadvantage, a separate status, and so a stigma upon all who enter into same-sex marriages. And he wrote, DOMA writes inequality into the entire United States.
This fellow, Justice Kennedy, recently retired. And he was somewhat liberal in his views, as you can see. He being a trump card for the ungodly and the left. Now they are in a big scramble to prevent anyone with any sort of conservative or constitutionalist view from entering on the Supreme Court. So that is what is going on now in the States with the latest Supreme Court hearings.
When it announced its pro-gay marriage rulings, the Supreme Court also attacked the motives of those who came up with the Defense of Marriage Act. The effect of the law here in question are to impose a disadvantage, a separate status, and so a stigma upon all who enter into same-sex marriages. And he wrote, DOMA writes inequality into the entire United States Code.
The court said that the Federal Defense of Marriage Act is literally irrational. irrational. The law was motivated by animus. Animus means hatred and discrimination.
That it was just the fruit of bigotry and benighted souls.
There's absolutely a growing threat under this administration and under this court.
Tony Perkins of the Family Research Council says the hostility against supporters of traditional marriage will get worse.
And I think you will see open hostility, increasing open hostility. I mean, we've seen just over the weekend at gay pride events where there were Christians there who were beaten because they took a stand for biblical morality.
Thomas Peters of the National Organization for Marriage says up till now, action against traditional marriage backers has mostly come at the state level, and cases have been piling up in recent years.
The Colorado baker who right now can spend a year in jail for refusing to give a wedding cake to a gay ceremony, or the town clerks in New York that had to resign their jobs because they simply asked that someone else in the office would sign the same-sex marriage license and they wouldn't have to do it, or the wedding photographer in New Mexico who's been fined thousands of dollars simply for saying that they didn't want to photograph a gay ceremony.
In Canada, which has had same-sex marriages nationwide since 2005, in the last few years, 200 to 300 cases against opponents of gay marriage were brought before courts, human rights commissions, and employment boards. Now, Perkins expects a steep rise in cases across the U.S., and he says that's going to have a major impact on America.
This is about fundamentally altering the American society. Loss of religious freedom, loss of parental rights, employers, bakers, photographers, florists being forced to participate by threat of law in same-sex marriages.
This Washington State florist in March refused to supply the flowers for a gay wedding because of her Christian beliefs.
She said, I will happily serve you as an individual, but I don't believe in gay weddings, and so I'm not going to do the weddings for a ceremony. The Attorney General of the ACLU colluded to sue her with criminal and civil penalties. This is just a gross overreach of power.
And these days, the most active of gay rights activists demand affirmation from everyone, and they suggest it's anti-gay to do anything less than show full support for them.
At this moment, apathy and passivity are no better than bigotry.
For instance, an email went to Department of Justice managers this spring saying they should display a gay pride symbol in their office. And it instructed when it comes to gays, quote, don't judge or remain silent. Silence will be interpreted as disapproval. So one way of bringing this atmosphere is what happens to federal workers who believe homosexuality.
So that's a critical point there. Apathy, yeah, this is a critical point. So it's not enough for you, because obviously they want to silence any sort of objection to their decadence. But it goes further than that. Not only should you remain silent, you have to publicly advocate for it, or you'll be counted as a bigot. For the sake of time, I'll pause this here. Right? For the sake of time, I'll pause this here because there's a quote I would like to read before I end. So ultimately, the sodomite movement is not only there to silence conscientious objection through its criminalization, but to compel open advocacy even against one's conscience. There's a quote which I like to read before I end. It's a quote taken from Thomas Jefferson. Now, it's a letter she wrote. I want veterans to basically take into consideration the principles laid out there. He says, this is taken from Rights of the People by A.T. Jones. And the quote, the excerpt is taken from Thomas Jefferson's proposition for an act for establishing religious freedom in 1779, right, in Virginia. He says here, page 19. He says, well aware that Almighty God had created the mind free, that all attempts to influence it by temporal punishments or burdens or by civil incapacitations tend only to beget habits of hypocrisy and meanness. And there a departure from the plain and holy author of our religion, who, being Lord both of body and mind, yet not to propagate it by coercions on either, as well as was in his almighty power to do, that the impious presumption of legislators and rulers, civil as well as ecclesiastical, who being themselves but fallible and uninspired men, have assumed dominion over the faith of others, setting up their own opinions and mode of thinking as the only true and infallible, and as such endeavoring to impose them on others, had established and maintained false religions over the greatest part of history and through time, that to compel a man to furnish contributions of money for the propagation of opinions which he disbelieves is sinful and tyrannical. So not only, so he's saying contributions of money, but contributions of your service to something that you think is sinful and ungodly. He says, this, to compel that is sinful and tyrannical. He goes on a little further down. The prescribing any citizen as unworthy of public confidence by laying upon them an incapability of being called to the offices of trust and emulance, unless he profess or renounce this or that religious opinion, is depriving him injuriously of those privileges and advantages to which, in common with his fellow citizens, he has as a natural right. He goes on here. And finally, that truth is great and will prevail if left to if left to herself, that she is a proper and sufficient antagonist to error, and has nothing to fear from the conflict unless by human interposition, disarmed of her natural weapons, which are free argument and debate, errors ceasing to be dangerous when it is permitted freely to contradict them. So basically, truth will always prevail so long as she has no weapons of use, which is open debate and argument against the error. And finally, he says, recognizing that though these principles, which are laid down in the U.S. Constitution, recognizing that a time may come when men may depart from it, he says this. He says, and though we well know that this assembly, elected by the people for the ordinary purpose of legislation only, have no power to restrain the acts of succeeding assemblies, constituted with powers equal to our own, and that therefore to declare this act irrevocable would be of no effect in law. Yet, we are free to declare, and do declare, that the rights hereby asserted are the natural rights of mankind, and that if any act shall be hereafter passed to repeal the present or to narrow its operation, such an act is an infringement of natural right. So, brethren, I will end with this by the grace of God. Stand for religious liberty, fight for religious liberty, and God will help us. And so, that is my little study there by the grace of God. So I'll close with a word of prayer. Most eternal God and Father, I thank you again for the opportunity to speak before your saints concerning the gift of religious liberty which you have granted unto us, and the freedom to express our convictions of our conscience which you will place on our hearts. I pray then, Father, that as the day goes on, the principles which are laid down by all the brethren who are to speak will be settled in our hearts, that we may appreciate this time of peace which we have, and the relative freedom which we have at this time. And within this time, Lord, preach the gospel to bring all men unto you, as you will have them. For you have called all men unto you, Lord, and I pray that this gospel will go forward, and that those who will receive will be converted unto you and be saved. These mercies I ask through the faith of Jesus Christ. Amen.